Hello, please let me see your ticket subs for the double-edged double bill. Tonight we're saying up yours to the Good Dinosaur. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I'm Thomas Mariani, and there's a snake in my boot.
I am Adam Thomas, to infinity and beyond.
Ride him, cowboy, I suppose. But this isn't the usual Pixar buddy duo tonight, because we have a special guest with us. We have someone who you might have seen, or at least heard of, in our feedback section all the time. He always posts, and he is making his podcast debut, and is also our first podcaster that's from all the way in jolly old England. It is James Rodrigues. James, how are you doing?
Hello, Governor. Pip, pip, cheerio.
Just classing it up. So great.
Yep.
So, James, you really wanted to come on the show, and I gave you a bunch of topics, and you decided to go with our discussion for tonight, which is about Pixar films in honor of Toy Story 4 coming out. Why Pixar?
Well, I suppose Pixar's always been a touching subject for me. I mean, the very first film I was taken to see in the cinema was Toy Story, where we lived for most of our life. My family and I had a close cinema half-hour drive away, and we tend to venture out for family stuff. A lot of them were Pixar films, so it's always just had a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar thing. I think we're from the generation that really grew up with Pixar. We started making movies in 95, obviously, with the first Toy Story, and has gone from there. And I obviously had a huge attachment, especially to those Toy Story movies. There's a story that I was, I think, about 4 or 5 years old, and I was the ring bearer for a wedding of one of my parents' friends. And I had a Woody and a Buzz that I always carried with me. And they kept telling me, hey, you need to put those down so you can be the ring bearer. And I would insist, like, I'm not letting them go. So I literally walked down and gave the rings with fucking Woody and Buzz in my hand. Like, I was that fucking personally attached to those characters. And I've watched pretty much every single Pixar movie since, I would say, probably A Bug's Life. I don't know if I saw Toy Story in the theater because I was so young. But I definitely saw, like, all of the ones since. Maybe except, I think, like, a Cars 2. And some of the other lesser ones that we can get into in a bit. But Adam, you're a bit older than the two of us, but I'm sure you also loved watching these films as they came out.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, just as even to look at it like a computer-generated, animation, what the leaps and bounds they instantly were over all the competition, and basically still remain to be. I think I've seen every Pixar movie except for Cars 2. I have not seen Cars 2. I have zero interest. The only reason I've seen Cars 3 is because it's on one of the streaming services and my kid likes it. But other than that, yeah, I've seen them all. And I tend to actually kind of like all of them. I mean, some of them are lesser, but they're still all a marvel to even look at, though.
Yeah, like even the lesser ones where the story's like, oh, fucking hell, it's beautiful to look at. And that's a testament to their craft, really.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously they, with Toy Story, created the first feature-length computer-animated film, and animation's pretty much gone that way since, in terms of, like, bigger mainstream films. And it's definitely also, I think we can agree that I think it was around the first Cars where we started getting spottier Pixar quality. I mean, we still got great ones after that, like a Ratatouille or a WALL-E, but as things kind of went along, you got your Carses, you got your Braves, you got one of the films we're talking about tonight. Some of that probably came from, there was a point where a certain person who wore a lot of Hawaiian shirts and is a fucking piece of shit that started Pixar, like, kind of separated from the company and started working more on, like, Disney's, like, bigger feature film side. I think that's weird. It's like, as we got, Tangleds and Wreck-It Ralph's, I think that's where Pixar kind of started to suffer a bit more. But they still do deliver, like, big classic ones, like, probably as recently as Inside Out. I think it's phenomenal. And from what I've been hearing, despite how, we all kind of felt Toy Story 4 wasn't necessary, the reviews are saying it's pretty great. So you can't quite ever count them out.
Yeah, well, I can, and I will.
Fair enough. But we'll specifically target toward our 2 films for tonight, which at the end of last week's episode, we did our random selection of our 2 Pixar movies. First, the good one is 2009's Up, and then the bad one is 2015's The Good Dinosaur. And let's go ahead and get into our first one with Up.
This summer, Disney Pixar will take you on their next great adventure with Carl Fredricksen. And he won't even have to leave his house.
Hello, boys!
This summer, journey to a lost world with these guys.
Ah!
Please let me in.
No. All right.
Disney Pixar's Up.
So Up came out May 29th, 2009. I remember distinctly, it came out the same weekend as a previous subject of our show, Drag Me to Hell. It was the counter-programming to Up.
What a double bill that would make.
Yes, what a double bill indeed. And it was the 10th feature for Pixar, and it is directed by Pete Docter, who previous to this directed Monsters, Inc., and after this would direct Inside Out. This was my pick, and it's one that gets a lot of acclaim and clout and all this other stuff, but mostly really for the opening of the movie, which details how Carl, as played by Ed Asner, meets Ellie, who, as children, they meet each other, and then you see their entire sort of marriage and life go on from there until Ellie dies, and that was obviously the moment everyone talked about out of this movie, which, to be fair, it's breathtaking. It's some of the best animation that's ever been shown theatrically. It's such a great visual way of displaying an entire life in about 5 minutes, and it's breathtaking to watch. I believe we would agree.
Absolutely. It totally doesn't matter, but now, did she miscarry or she can't conceive? That's what I never understood.
I think they leave it open enough to where, like, you don't quite know the details of that, but
Still
you still
sucks
feel
either way.
I mean, yeah, it's still pretty bad. It's still a bummer. Yeah, it's still kind of a
Call it
bummer.
my just total morbidity. Like, well, which one is it, though? It really doesn't matter.
I would have loved to have been in the theater with you and all the families, just like, well, which one was it, Up?
2009. Yeah, I would have been like in my mid-20s. Around a bunch of kids. What the fuck?
But maybe despite not knowing the specific details, I'm sure, James, you agree with the sentiment?
Yeah, I think it's not radical to say that the opening is one of the best feats of work to have come out of Pixar. I mean, it's a short detail that journeys through an entire life, doesn't need to go into too much detail about the first date, his engagement. It says everything that you need to know to understand the life they shared over the, 60, 70 years. And it doesn't even use that much dialogue to deliver it. It feels indebted to silent cinema in such a way.
Well, yeah, that's true. It definitely feels indebted to that. And it's also the person that is owed the biggest debt of this movie, I would argue, is Michael Giacchino with his score. Is one of the best scores, I think, of the last 10 years. I think it's such a breathtaking, beautiful score that displays so much. And it doesn't just do the heavy lifting. It just like accentuates all the great stuff that's already in this entire movie, not just this opening. And that's the thing, is really, the reason I picked this is just because I've heard plenty of people say, oh man, after that great opening, the movie just kind of like trails off. It becomes a lot more about like this high-flying adventure with the bird and the dogs and all this other stuff. And I think that really dismisses a lot of the beautiful stuff that happens even after that opening. I think this movie is such a great way of showing off the Carl Fredricksen character really dealing with grief, and really how that grief translates to continuing on with your life even though something so important is gone. I think the way that they display it throughout this whole movie is so beautiful. I think it just, from that opening, it just skyrockets onward.
Soars like a balloon carrying a house.
Hey, there's your one. No, I agree with you, man. Like I said, pre-show, I think this is the first time, honestly, that I've watched this movie from beginning straight to end. I've seen it in pieces, and if you put it all together, it'd probably make the whole film. But to watch it from front to back, yeah, I just completely fell in love with this movie. It's not my favorite Pixar movie, but it's definitely right up there. There's so much going for this movie. I mean, just the character design alone, uh, the dogs, even the bird, Russell. I mean, there's just so much heart in this movie. And like you said, it really shows growth and, how you just kind of got to move on from things, too. Even when you don't want to, it'll be better for you in the long run. I really, really find it a heartwarming story.
I think it's a lovely tale about a man who's trying to accept his wife's loss. I mean, he goes through this whole thing. He talks to his house as if it's his actual wife, even calling it Ellie. It's his last connection to the woman he loves, the woman he lost. And it's not until, spoiler alert, until the end that he's finally ready to let go and move forward with his life with this new family that he's forged.
Yeah, and I especially love just the childishness of the image of like, oh, it's a bunch of balloons carrying off a house is like on its face ridiculous. But at the same time, what I love so much how that image really does, for lack of a better term, soar in such a beautiful way, where especially that whole sequence where like all of the fucking balloons come out of the top of his house and he's just flying throughout the city and everyone's just gasping and just can't really find the words. It's such a beautiful, simple image. That's what I really love about this movie is it takes such interesting, simplistic ideas, and even a lot of Pixar movies do this about like, oh, hey, what if we could make our houses fly with balloons? Hey, what if we could hear our dogs talk? Just simple stuff like that, or even the dynamic, the classic buddy dynamic they always use in these movies of like, hey, Carl's this old, bitter guy, and Russell is this adorable, young, naive kid. Perfect buddy team that clashes with each other, opposites attract kind of thing. It's such a fun dynamic that's so simple. Pixar manages to flourish so much detail out of the simple, and I think this is the most brilliant example of that.
I want to pose a question. Now, if say they did make this a little more realistic, this movie, which is, impossible, but how long do you think it would take before the Air Force took him down? I'm guessing not very long.
No, probably not long at all. I mean, if we wanted like the 14-minute movie where it's like after that beautiful opening, just like, I'm flying!
Especially over like a major metropolitan area.
Just shards of wood going everywhere. You see Russell's hat float down to the ground.
We got one away. Tango down. Tango down.
Which, I will say, this movie does have probably the darkest Pixar moment that's one of my favorites, where they're still in the city, and Russell's like, oh, look, I could almost touch that building. And Carl thinks he can, like, so bring the rope down, and then he's like, let's go. And it cuts back like, no, that's not going to work. That might be the darkest moment in a Pixar movie of humor. And it's so perfectly timed.
I don't know what it is about that moment, but every time I watch that film, just when the rope slips, I just like, oh my God. And I know Pixar's not going to kill the kid like that, but it still makes me jump. Maybe I'm just an idiot.
We'll err on the side of it's the effect of the Pixar filmmaking.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
But I would say, like, around the time this came out, so impressed by especially vocally Ed Asner's performance in this movie. I think Ed Asner is always an underrated character actor in general, and I think here especially, it's such a great way of just vocally displaying so much about this character and how bitter he is now, completely lost he is, but at the same time, how much he still holds a lot of deep-seated emotions in him. I think it's an incredible performance from him, and maybe my favorite performance in any Pixar movie, vocally.
No, yeah, I agree. It's such a good performance that you almost forget that it's not Ed Asner on screen. Like that Carl's not Ed Asner. Like, he's just a character. Like, it's perfect. But then when you look at it, he looks like kind of a mix between Ed Asner and Scorsese a little bit.
A bit of Spencer Tracy as well was apparently.
That's true. Yeah,
big inspiration. Yeah.
No, but it's probably my favorite vocal performance from a Pixar movie. I agree.
Funnily enough, in Colombia, this film got a lot of unexpected publicity because Carl has an uncanny resemblance to one of their ex-presidents. Like, if you search. Just reading it. Julio Cesar Turbay Ayala. He looks right down to the bow tie. Looks right like him.
I mean, I think that just displays a lot to the universality of Carl's design. I think because, admittingly, I remember when this came out, I instantly thought, like, that's my grandfather. I was just having dinner with that dude last night, And it's like, that dude looks exactly like Carl Fredricksen. I think it's such a great caricature of an old man in a way that feels very universal, and it also kind of resembles another apparent inspiration from Pete Docter with the designs of this specific movie was the Muppets in terms of like a lot of the facial designs and stuff like that. And you can also see like a bit of Statler and Waldorf in Carl. And even with like when we get to Kevin, has obviously like a sort of a Big Bird effect almost in terms of the design as well. I think that just shows how they are able to, like the Muppets, sort of display this very simplistic but engaging character with like Carl, especially in like the shapes, where Carl's like this very square, sort of almost robotic-looking design in terms of his body, versus this sort of round, almost eggish joy of Russell. I just love, even visually, they bounce off each other so well.
Yeah, and then you got the main heavy, who's tall and lanky. It's perfect, like, against each other.
Played by your boy, Christopher Plummer.
Dude, he is my boy, too, and he, you know what, man? Fuck you if you don't like Christopher Plummer. He's dope in this movie, too. Like, it's Christopher Plummer, but, man, that guy can't do no wrong in my eyes.
And also, I would not know it was Christopher Plummer if you hadn't told me.
And that's because you don't love the C Plum like I do.
What also works about his character, I love how the villain is a great contrast to the main player, because that happens a lot in these Pixar movies where you have whatever villain character is a direct sort of either mirror or correlation to the main character. Like, probably my favorite example is like Toy Story 2 with Stinky Pete. Who is very much Woody from the first movie, just gone way too far into hating space toys. Versus this time, I like the idea of Carl coming up against his idol, the person that made him want to be an adventurer, and realizing that dude was just totally into it for the sake of glory and fame and making his name what it needs to be and destroying anyone in his wake. And how, like, sort of that perception that he had about what adventuring was when he was so into it with Ellie was just like, oh, wait, we kind of had this beautiful view of it, but we could easily see how this could have corrupted if we went there, especially however younger we might have been. And we could have ended up easily in this sort of camp. And how really adventuring mainly depends on like having a good motivation at heart versus, being a crazy old man who... I love also another dark moment, how he has like all the different helmets with the goggles on the little like wooden staples. It's like, oh, they tell me so many stories, hiking, bird watches, and all this shit. It's like, oh crap, they're implying he just fucking made heads roll, literally.
Yep. And by the way, he's aged fantastic, that character. Because he had to be in his 30s probably when Carl was just a little boy. Now Carl's 77 and he looks younger. Like, so that's another thing too. But I guess there was some original plot idea to where maybe those birds' eggs could like reverse aging.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing maybe that might be why he's so young, and they just stuck with the design.
Yeah, I believe that was the case, but also you didn't really need that. I'm glad they kind of got rid of that, because I really like just the very simplistic nature of this plot. I think makes like all the details really flourish pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need anything too complex to sell a villain. I mean, like you said, that scene with the hitting all the goggles and helmets and just showing how cracked he's been from all this time isolated, focused on clawing his way back and proving his name right all over again. That sells it.
We need to talk more about Russell, though. I think Russell is the most underrated MVP of this whole movie. And I think he's such, like, as voiced by Jordan the Guy, he is such an adorable, doofish child that I can't stop watching all of the interaction between him and Carl. Right from the snipe bit at the very beginning when he's introduced is such a cute, endearing scene where he just earnestly wants to help out because of this like connection it has to, the scout thing that he's a part of and his father and all this other stuff. I think they do such a great job of displaying so much about Russell's home life through very simple conversations. And especially a scene that like really hits me is the bit where they're just talking about, oh yeah, whenever I used to go to my, after my scout things with my dad, we'd go over and get ice cream and I'd get chocolate and he'd get peanut brittle. I really miss the small moments like that. It just really fucking hits you so hard, just small, intimate, beautiful things like that.
Yeah, it's those smaller moments which I find to be the best of this film. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love the more extravagant, the more adventure-esque elements, with the more out there stuff which Pixar do so well, but it's those, just the two of them, Carl and Russell, bonding and having a lovely back and forth, which really works for me. It's just like, hey, you want to play the quiet game? Ooh, my mum loves that game.
Right.
Yeah, and the backstory they give Russell too. You're like, without really getting into it, because they didn't need to. That's another great thing, like we already addressed about this movie. There's no need to get really in depth with backstory for any of these characters. You get who the characters are; they're fully fleshed out as soon as you see them. But his little backstory, it's so tragic. And then even at the end, where he's getting his badge, and his father's not there, but Carl steps up. You're like, oh man, oh. I just want this little scamp to get it together and go to college.
Yeah, especially there's that bit where they're talking like campfire side, and he brings up like, oh yeah, my dad's not always around all the time. Why don't you hit him up? Oh, I always call, but Lisa always picks up the phone. You call your mother Lisa? Lisa's not my mom.
Yeah.
And just awkward silence. That's so perfect. That says everything you need to know about that relationship. And how Carl is just realizing in his head. And how that instantly makes him way more sympathetic to Russell. I just love that they display so much of that just visually. This movie's honestly a masterpiece of visual storytelling throughout the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. Especially with, like, even when you brought it up earlier, when he first deploys the balloons. And just the different colors that are coming through the sun, through the balloons. And like when it's illuminating the little girl or then the two orderlies and everything, this movie is just breathtakingly beautiful. And also, like you said, there's a lot of really good subtle jokes in this movie too. Like there's a lot. My favorite is probably the Wilhelm scream from the dogs.
When the dogs fall over.
So good. I laughed so loud. But this movie's just, it's such a treat. Like, I guarantee you, I'm going to watch this again and again and again, especially because my kids sat and watched the whole thing with me. But I can't wait to see more of the little subtle things. Like, this movie's the real deal, man. It's the real deal, bro.
Well, I mean, I feel Russell delivers a lot of the wonderful little moments when he first meets Kevin and he's just, hey, Mr. Fredrickson, I've brought back that snipe. And Carl's just all like, oh, sure you have, not realizing there's a giant bird towering behind him.
Yeah, I love so much of, like, Kevin, I think, is such a great example of a character who displays so much emotion without ever saying anything. Because obviously we have the dogs that talk. But Kevin is my favorite animal, honestly, of this whole movie. Because it had, like, the way it bounces off of people, like when Carl was, like, shooting at it, like, she was like, whoa! Moving its feathers and shit like that. It's such a great example of, like, how to build an animal character and build so much character and emotion. Especially when later on, she is just, like, in pain with her leg and then, like, calling out to her babies that she can hear on the other side. There's so much actual, like, emotion displayed through kind of a cartoonish character. And it's I think that's another genius element of this movie with Pixar especially. And also just, it's so funny that he calls him Kevin. I just love how nondescript and stupid a name like Kevin is for this majestic giant bird.
Even when he finds out it's a female, it doesn't change.
Yeah,
it's still Kevin. Yep. It's so...
Yep, still Kevin.
Kevin's a girl?
And I love Doug. Doug's great. I just met you and I love you. This is perfect. It's such a dog.
Yes, and that's another great example where Pixar will often like just put in one of their employees to do like a temp voice, but then thinking they will replace it with some other like actual actor, and they're like, oh no, we gotta keep this voice, and that's Bob Peterson, one of the writers, who interestingly was supposed to direct our next movie and then got dropped off the project. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I love his voice for Doug, especially just how he exuberates everything about like a dumb but lovable dog in his voice. That's so amazing. It captures the essence of a dog through that. Just like the obviously the squirrel bit, which is probably like another cultural touchstone this movie's done, where every time I hear somebody talk about like being distracted in the last 10 years, they all often mention I'm squirreling. I'm looking off to the side, just looking at a squirrel. Stuff like that. And that contrasts so well also with the other dogs, particularly Alpha, obviously, which is, it's such a dumb joke of like, oh, its voice is affected so it sounds like a chipmunk, but it's so goddamn funny when he delivers these big villainous monologues and he's got this fucking chipmunk voice. It's on a primal level. It's so...
And how something so simple like the dogs mistaking Russell for a tiny mailman.
Your mailman friends can't help you now.
And I love the cone of isolation.
And
Yeah,
something so simple as Doug just going, I hid under your porch because I love you. Just, that's exactly how I'd imagine if a dog could talk to me. It sounds that just so sad but loving.
Right, yeah, they do such a great job of, like, especially really visually matching those things without making it seem like the dogs are actually talking. They do a great job, like, matching sort of, like, how these dogs are, like, expressing themselves vocally, but how they would actually move in a somewhat realistic way. Like, I love the bit when the two other dogs that are with Alpha, like, start laughing at his voice, and they just kind of, like, move their heads like a dog would and just open their mouths agape, but they're actually laughing hysterically on the mics. I think that's a subtle thing, another great example of, like, how Pixar can actually manage to, like, make the sort of vocal things match without having to resort to them just literally talking. I think that's another great example of the animation here. But I'll ask, what is the most emotional moment in this movie that isn't related to the opening?
I'd probably say at the end when the dad doesn't turn up for Russell's ceremony and Carl takes his place and pins on the grape soda badge. It's such a lovely touch of how he's ready to move on and he's passing on the gift from his late wife that he wore every day onto this surrogate son of his.
Yeah, I like when Carl's going through the adventure book and he finally goes further in the book than he ever has. And he sees that she did live all the adventures that she wanted. And she had a very fulfilling life, that he was enough for her, that she didn't even need to go to Paradise Falls. Like, she already had what she wanted.
That was really the moment. Like, usually when I get, like, emotional or cry about a movie, it's usually just, like, I kind of feel it, or there's a couple tears that come down. I was ugly crying this time.
I almost cried just now describing it.
Right? Like, that's really the moment, because it pays off so much about that opening. And with that little note in particular about just, like, I lived my adventure, so go keep living one. That just, like, it's so beautiful. It's so devastating. And it makes this big adventurous climax that happens afterward all the more fun. Because Carl is, like, fully fulfilled and realizes, like, I don't need to just go on this journey that basically, I think they do a great job of hinting at this, too, without right expressing it. It's like a suicide mission, basically, for Carl. Like, Carl is planning to get that house there on top of Paradise Falls and dying in that house, basically, given just the lack of any provisions he has and all this other shit. They do a great job of hinting at all that, but this is a, like, last mission, I can't keep going after this kind of thing. And he gets another reason not just to, like, keep on, you know, going past this bit at the house, but just living a full life again after finding that. It's such a beautiful sentiment that makes, you know, all the stuff that I've heard some people complain about, like, oh, they're just dogs on the fucking planes, and there's a comedic sword fight. Just like that emotional heft makes all that stuff all the more fun because he's living an adventure. He's doing what Ellie wants him to do in the biggest, was over the top way. He wouldn't have had the chance to do that if he had just gotten to Paradise Falls and just plonked himself down there. He wouldn't have that chance, and I think that's so beautiful that it makes the silliness afterward still just matters so much on an emotional level.
Thomas, do you like this movie? I'm having trouble.
I mean, it's no Cars 2.
Right.
The peak of Pixar filmmaking. But now, yeah, this is my favorite Pixar movie. I 100% straight on that. I mean, I think The Incredibles is very close. It's very close for me. And I mean, the Academy are pretty big fans of it too, given this is only one of 3 animated films ever nominated for Best Picture. Along with before Beauty and the Beast, after it Toy Story 3. And it ended up winning for animated film and score, which, like I said, you guys didn't get much of a chance to talk about, but you guys agree, right? The Giacchino score.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Giacchino's stuff has been great since, well, Lost, and his upscore is some of his best work. It's just really tugs at your heartstrings and makes you really feel every note of it.
Yeah, but do you guys feel that distinction of being one of the few animated films nominated for Best Picture is valid? You think that's deserving of this movie?
It's well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely do. In fact, I gotta be honest, what won the year this was nominated?
2009, I think that would have been Hurt Locker, right?
Oh,
yeah, that was the year it beat out Avatar.
That's pretty good, too. So...
If it was Avatar, we would have been up in arms.
No, if it was Avatar, we'd be like, fuck this! Fuck this! The Academy is bullshit! Well, the Academy kind of is bullshit, but...
Yeah, wait, you just held off for another year, and then King's Speech won, and then you could say it again.
God.
Wasn't that the first year the Academy expanded their selection to 10 films?
I believe so, yeah, because that was right after The Dark Knight, and that was the movie that kind of made them say, like, well, we should do, like, 10. And this was the first year. So it was nominated, it was that weird year where it was, like, a mixture of, like, Hurt Locker, and Avatar, and District 9, and Up. And it's just such a weird collection of movies, but interesting at least, yeah.
It's almost like they were trying to just fit in a load of films with... Because, I mean, this year and the next year are both have animated feature, a Pixar one as well, nominated for Best Picture. And, well, it's stopped there. It's been nearly 10 years and there's not been another one. I would have argued that Inside Out should have been nominated.
I think that's another thing, is that Pete Docter does such a great job. He's one of the few guys on there where Pixar obviously is so much more of like a story collaborative thing. But I think like him and Brad Bird, and to a certain extent, a certain person who wears Hawaiian shirts, are kind of the auteurs.
Tom Selleck. You're talking about Tom Selleck.
Fine, yes, Tom Selleck, the big papa of Pixar. Obviously, Tom Selleck. No. All right, it's John Lasseter. He can go fuck himself. But yeah, like those guys are the few that like I think kind of make their sort of directive stamp on these movies, where it's not just a Pixar movie, but I think you can make the connection of like Monsters Inc., Up, and then Inside Out feel like a specific distinctive voice from like specifically like Doctor, who's now the head of Pixar, thankfully, because he hasn't done anything horribly allegedly as of yet. But I think he can also, steer this company in a much more interesting direction.
At the very least, I hope this direction holds more original fare like Up and Inside Out, and a bit less of, let's pump out another sequel.
But James, we need Finding Marlin. We need it so much. We gotta find Marlin, I guess. But they've said as much admittingly, that like after Toy Story 4, they said, we're gonna focus more on original films. And there's that one Onward.
Yeah, is that the fantasy one? Like, where the trolls and stuff?
Yeah, it's like suburban trolls and shit, which...
I saw Hotel Transylvania before. It wasn't that good.
Same exact thing, obviously.
I should have said something worse. But yeah, I saw Schindler's List already. Yeah.
Man, that movie's going to make a weird turn after they get out of that van in that trailer.
It's going to be awful. Ray Fiennes is going to be in a tower.
Oh, no.
No, I'm definitely excited to see where they're going to go. That Onward one did not really like filling me with a bunch of joy, but we'll see. I mean, I haven't been supremely disappointed by them, so I can't see why it would start now, especially with this guy helming it. So
you need to watch Cars 2 to humble yourself.
I can't fucking do it. I won't fucking do it. I'm not going to do it, man. I'm sorry. Like, even Cars 3. I say I watched it. By watched it, I mean I was dicking around on my phone, and while my kid watched it. So no, no, I'm not doing it. Fucking Owen Wilson is a car. Get the fuck out of here.
That's your problem. That's the big problem. Not anything else.
That's part of that's I know it sounds shallow, but that's probably my biggest problem. Wow, my headlights, cool.
The difference is Cars 2 stars Mater, so Larry the Cable Guy, your favorite comedian. I'm sure you would love it.
No, he is my absolute favorite, and in no way a cliche or a stereotype.
Not at all, no.
You know, if it wasn't for the Cars franchise, I don't think we would have gone Larry the Cable Guy over here. So, thanks, Pixar.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. That's a little bit of the USA for you, buddy.
Yep, finally you get the pure joy of the blue-collar comedy tour, James. Isn't it great?
Oh, it's everything I hope for.
Absolutely, it should. You're welcome, mister.
All right, we're getting far off of this. Let's steer this house back into the direction of Paradise Falls and go into our final thoughts here. Let's go with James, your final thoughts on Up.
Yeah, it's really odd this film doesn't get as much recognition as it should, especially considering how much the opening is adored and praised by everybody. But at its heart, this is a really touching tale about moving on from past hurt, and it works thanks to the great characters. Well, I love it. It makes my heart soar, to steal one of your quotes, Thomas.
We've been using this word too fucking much. We gotta get a goddamn thesaurus.
Or a thesaurus.
Oh, it's a good transition, but put a pin in it, because Adam and I need to do a final. Adam, your final thoughts.
I don't think it's that this movie didn't get the recognition it deserves. I don't think it has any lasting recognition for some reason. Whereas people still talk about Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, and, Inside Out, and all this other, even WALL-E more than Up. It's like, I don't understand. Like, Up to me is damn near a perfect movie, and it's easily in my top 3 Pixar movies of all time. It just makes my heart fill with helium to burst, and I think I need to go to the doctor. I didn't want to say it makes me. No, I'm just gonna say it. Makes my heart soar, guys. So
Hey.
soar so high. No, I think it's just a lovely, lovely movie. It's got so much heart, and it's very sweet and touching. And you don't get that a lot anymore, at least where it feels original in animated films. Usually beat for beat, sort of the same idea, but this one really sort of tugs at the old heartstrings and makes them soar.
Twice
Twice
in there.
Two for
Oh my god, we're going to call this podcast Soars now. This is the Soars podcast. Soarin' with Adam and Thomas.
You can.
Anyway, for me, as I said, it's my favorite Pixar movie. I think does such a great job of putting all of their great tricks into one basket in a way that's extremely creative. It has some of the best vocal performances in Pixar's history. It has my favorite score of any of them. I think it's such a beautiful sentiment about, like James mentioned, really growing from something huge and tragic, and how especially you can do that at an older age. I love the fact that they kind of set Carl up as somebody who would be so set in his ways. Like, we didn't mention the whole Carmen montage at the beginning, which is a great way of setting up where he is at that time. And just how bitter and just through with the world he is, and how he doesn't want to progress at all. He wants to just stay in his specific spot and not progress anything onward. But how from there it keeps on continuing, even like some subtle ways we didn't mention. Like, I love the fact that you see earlier on Ellie, whenever they were at that park they worked at, always worked with like exotic birds. What does Carl run into? Exotic bird. Exactly, yeah. Kevin, our other guest in the studio at the moment. It's rare we have someone from the movie here. But no, it's a great movie. I love it so much. I think it deserves a lot more recognition for not just that amazing opening, but from then on it just becomes, I think, honestly, a perfect movie. And I can say that about very few films. But let's go to a movie that's maybe not so perfect, to say the least. It is The Good Dinosaur.
I'm done being scared.
If you ain't scared, you ain't alive.
So, The Good Dinosaur came out, as we mentioned, in 2015, was the second Pixar movie that year, after the previously mentioned Inside Out came out that June, and everyone was so all about it. Then November, on Thanksgiving weekend, November 25th of 2015, we got The Good Dinosaur, which, before it came out, was sort of marred by some production difficulties. It was originally, as I mentioned, going to be directed by Bob Peterson, who got removed off the project, replaced with Peter Sohn. To be fair, a lot of Pixar movies have had production difficulties. When this was coming up, I was like, well, you know, Toy Story and Toy Story 2 had infamously terrible productions, where, like, the first Toy Story, like, animatic was presented to, like, all the Disney people, and everyone realized, oh, you took all of Jeffrey Katzenberg's notes, and this is garbage. You have to completely start over. And then Toy Story 2 was going to be a direct-to-video movie, and then the Pixar guys came in like, wait, we want to actually make this good. Okay, you can do that and put it out in theaters in 9 months.
Oh, good lord, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that movie's fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. That's my favorite Pixar movie, period.
And they nearly lost it all.
That's true, right. There was a point where like they nearly lost, like, I think 40% of the hard drive of the movie, apparently.
Oh my god.
I know. And that movie turned out amazing. So I was like, well, you know, The Good Dinosaur could probably maybe turn out amazing. You know, at that point, Pixar hadn't really disappointed me that much before. And I don't know. I don't think this is a bad movie per se, but it's extremely aimless.
I'd say that's fair. I mean, I think this movie does have genuine moments of heart in it, and there's a lot of cute stuff. But it just feels like a very paint-by-numbers sort of animated movie. It doesn't... Nothing about this movie other than it does look very good. There's a lot of beautiful scenery and things like that, but it doesn't quite feel like a Pixar movie to me.
I think that's my thoughts pretty much. I mean, this was released the same year as Inside Out, one of the best Pixar films of, well, for me, all time. But it doesn't feel like it came out in the same year. To me, it feels more like a mid-2000 Disney film, like you'd get alongside Chicken Little or Home on the Range. It just, was just disappointing me.
I won't go that far, because that's a really harsh comparison. I would somewhat agree with, like, it reminds me a lot of something like A Brother Bear, where you're like, there's interesting elements here that I could see this working, but it just doesn't ever really decide anything specific. Because, like, with a Pixar movie, what I usually love is they have some sort of very simple baseline premise at heart, like cowboy doll, space action figure, fighting each other for a child's love. It's a very simple premise, you can get behind it, it's easy. With this one, it has, like, a few different ones, and it never sticks to them. Like, the biggest disappointment for me of this movie is they set up at the beginning that, like, oh, this is a world where dinosaurs were never hit by the comet. Mm-hmm. That instantly brings up so many interesting ideas about, like, what if dinosaurs were the dominant species and they kept evolving from here? How does that progress? What does society look like? And they farm.
Right. I agree. 100%. 100%. How cool would it be if they had, like, fucking office jobs or something?
It just became Disney's Dinosaurs, basically, the old Jim Henson show.
Yeah, basically, but that would have totally worked. Other than this. I mean, to me, this doesn't even feel like a Disney movie. It feels more like a DreamWorks release. Like, I could see this right along with, like, the later How to Train Your Dragons or, you know, things like that. It feels like it would fit shoehorn, like, kind of right in with those. But yeah, oh, God, the dinosaurs didn't die. The comet never hit. This is what they become? They farm fucking corn?
The most exciting thing ever, Adam. They're
in Iowa? What the fuck is going on here?
And especially, you don't ever get a sense of, like, where that fits in with the rest of the dinosaurs. Like, all these different dinosaurs are so separated from each other that it's like, did they actually not die off? Are they dying off now? Is this, like, post-apocalyptic dinosaur times? Because of we just kind of, like, bump into them so many thousands of yards away whenever Arlo, our main character, kind of bumps into them. Which is especially a bummer, because honestly, I think the moment where this movie lights up for me is when they run into Sam Elliott and the other T-Rexes. I think that's where, like, the movie has so much life breathed.
Oh yeah, when the Dino Farmer film suddenly becomes a Dino Western, which sounds like an awesome idea.
Right!
You got Sam Elliott. Bad impression right there.
Oh, Sam Elliott's in the studio, ladies and gentlemen.
You got your ass.
Wow!
Oh yeah, we're getting all the celebrities tonight.
Oh, can I touch your mustache, sir?
That's crazy.
Don't you dare.
Oh, I love doing the Star Sport. You're so great.
Oh, man.
I think for me, it's a great idea, but, well, this is probably just going to be what I think of the film. Great idea, shame about the execution. The idea of what if the dinosaurs didn't get hit by the comet? It's awesome idea, but it just feels like a copy and paste job where the humans are just, let's take out the humans, put dinosaurs in there. Oh, look how different it is. No, it isn't. That's bright levels of lazy world building. It's fucking bullshit.
Well, no, it's not quite that, because they don't even have them, like, in the human society. It's just like, oh, there are these dinosaurs farming, and then thousands of miles away, there's these pterodactyls that have some kind of, like, religious connection to the storm, which is a thread that goes fucking nowhere. And then thousands of yards away, there's the T-Rexes that have, like, these rustling cattle adventures, where, like, at least with something like a sort of bright thing, or like we mentioned, sort of making a dinosaurs, the TV show level thing out of this, that wouldn't have been the most original idea, but at least it would have been a more consistent world. There's no real world building going on. It feels like they're just these cul-de-sacs of story that are so separated from each other.
No, I completely agree. I will say, though, that I do like Spot as a character. I think he's adorable. I like the idea to where he's like the dinosaur's dog, things like that. But then again, they could have done that. They could have had where the dinosaurs had pet humans and things like that. I mean, anything. I mean, that might be a little pushing slavery a little bit, and we probably don't want to do.
I would have gone for hopefully more Planet of the Apes with that as opposed to slavery, but sure.
You don't know. They're farming. Who knows what the hell's going to happen there? Anyways, it's just ultimately just bland. Sam Elliott's really the only voice acting that stands out in the movie as well, which sucks because, like, Jeffrey Wright, I love Jeffrey Wright. I don't really care that he's the dad. Frances McDormand, don't care that she's the mom. Like, nobody really sticks out in this movie. No performance other than Sam Elliott. And it's because it's Sam Elliott as soon as you hear him talk.
Yeah, because, I mean, when he tells that whole crocodile story, like, I was bit by a croc on my face. Like, that's such a great Sam Elliott moment that you're just, like, kind of giddy about it. But even just the visual image of, like, how those T-Rexes ride, and it almost looks like they are horseback riding, but on their own two back feet. That's such a cool visual. That's more of the clever stuff we're talking about. And now they're going through, like, valleys that look like old Monument Valley from, like, all the old westerns and shit like that. That's cool. And it's like, why didn't we have the fucking dinosaur western movie? That would have been the best.
That would have been more interesting.
Rex Dead Redemption. It would have been perfect.
It would have been like right along with Rango type of thing, though. I mean, granted, Rango's not dinosaurs, but you already got the animal western animated movie. So, I don't know. I just, there is so much lost potential here. But again, I still think it's kind of a cute movie. My fucking kid loves it. She loves the movie because she loves dinosaur movies. Well, she thinks every dinosaur movie is a Godzilla movie now. So
because of our previous episode,
because of the previous one where she watched Godzilla and she called it the dinosaur movie. So now every dinosaur movie she thinks it's Godzilla, but she loved it. So I mean, it works for kids, but you got to figure we're also grown ass men in our mid to late 20s to mid 30s, sitting here going, "Oh, this movie shit." Like, it's not for us at all.
I mean, no. I don't know if it's necessarily I think it's shit, because I think, like, you could watch a Cars 2 and think, like, oh, that's pure shit. This is way more to me of, like, a Brave, where it's more frustrating because I see the really good movie in it. And there's just, like, there's so many avenues, especially here, for that, and it just doesn't quite work. And even on an animation level, like, we talked about how gorgeous it looks, I agree with that about the backgrounds. Like, all of the backgrounds and stuff look photorealistic, it's amazing. But then, all the dinosaurs look super goofy cartoony, which is such a weird contrast. It's, like, so odd to see, like, them contrast with their background.
I hate the character design of Arlo and his family. I can't stand it. With the square faces and the big eyes and everything. It just, for some reason, it just looks so fucking stupid to me.
They look like Fisher-Price toys.
100%. I don't mind the pterodactyls looking how they did, kind of squirrely with, whatever. Or even the ones that the T-Rexes fight, I get it. They're supposed to be like poachers or whatever. But fuck, the rest of them just look like Playmobil toys or Fisher-Price toys. Like you said, it just, I just can't get behind that character design. I can't stand it.
But did you never want to see Fisher-Price toys tripping on hallucinogenic berries before?
Oh yeah, that scene.
Well, the thing with that is I usually trip on hallucinogenics and play with Fisher-Price toys, so I've kind of gotten that movie already.
Let go of Lily's toys, Adam. You have to stop.
Those are my treasures. She can't have them. But, no, you could tell that there was a myriad of production issues with this movie.
I just feel like if I didn't know about the production issues, it'd still feel something off. But at least knowing of all the shit the film went through, it's this makes a bit more sense, and just feels like it rushes along with
I love that sounds like it actually puts you in pain.
Full disclosure, I haven't seen either of the Cars sequels, so before this, the worst, well, not even worst, Cars was my weakest Pixar film, and even then I had some things I liked about it. This is just, it just really disappointing.
Well, yeah, because Cars at least has just the general theme that's going on about, like, for, as kind of pandering nostalgia as it is about, like, Route 66, what happened to going on the big, sort of trip and finding all these different sort of roadside attractions along the way, and now we have freeways. Like, it's kind of lame, but at the same time, I can at least respect that is some kind of recurring thread, that's a theme that goes throughout that entire movie, versus this one has so much spattering. Because honestly, I just feel like if I was a kid, I'd be really bored by this movie. Because even as much as you compare it to like DreamWorks movies, for as bad as those can get, they at least feel like they're really going for broke and just throwing everything at the screen. Sometimes it can be just fucking awful, but at the very least, it's like, well, you're kind of trying too hard, but you're trying. This movie just feels so boring. I don't know how many kids would really keep their attention. It didn't keep a lot of people's attention at surprisingly a pretty big number still. $332 million. It is the lowest grossing Pixar film to date by a pretty wide margin.
Wasn't it a actual box office bomb?
It's their only one that they lost them money. Yeah.
Wow. That's a darn shame. Well, why am I caring? Fucking
Exactly. Why are you caring so much? And I think, the biggest thing we haven't really talked about, because like we kind of mentioned his design, but the crux of all of this is Arlo may be the dullest Pixar protagonist of all time. Because his only thing is like, oh, I'm a coward. It's like, but are you like funny? Are you interesting?
He's a whiny brat.
Yeah. That's the big problem, is like, even when some people are whiny, like, Woody in the original Toy Story, he's kind of an asshole to Buzz that whole first part of the movie.
But he's got a reason for it.
Right, there's a reason for it. You get that he like has this love for Andy and all this other stuff, and they want to have that like sort of father-son dynamic, but then they kill off his dad so early, which, by the way, I had no idea that was Jeffrey Wright until I like looked at the credits when I first watched this. I'm like, holy fuck, that's Jeffrey Wright. It sounds nothing like Jeffrey Wright.
No,
like
I know.
at all. And that's another thing with like some of the production stuff, was it was originally going to be John Lithgow in that part, and there were going to be more siblings voiced by like Neil Patrick Harris and Judy Greer and Bill Hader, and they got cut.
I mean, it feels like they're trying to sell family as a big part of this story, from the early scenes of them all making their mark and bonding and Arlo trying to get back. But I suppose outside of Arlo and his father a bit, I didn't really feel that connection. I mean, Arlo's brother's a dick, and he never interacts with his sister, to my recollection.
Remember when he had a sister in the movie and you completely forgot about it?
Yes. I mean, she gets her grass watered and then, learns invisibility? Come on.
I don't disagree with you, too. And it's like, even after his dad dies, like, Arlo's the smallest one. His mom's like, you need to do more work around here. You're like, God damn. Let him grieve.
What about the brother who's like twice his size? Why is he not doing anything? Apparently?
Right, exactly. Where the fuck is he?
It really is just like, especially the weird sort of structure thing too. Like, what I love about most Pixar movies is they have such a great intricate structure, and they make such a big deal about like, we love to like plan out the story. Whenever something doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board and like scrap everything. And this movie has the weirdest structural stuff, especially at the beginning, where it's like Arlo and his dad try and find Spot and end up getting like whisked away in this giant fucking storm, and cuts to Arlo is alive, but his father just implies dead, and the mom's like, oh, I need to do more work, Arlo. And then Arlo sees Spot like, hey, I'm gonna get you, and then he gets washed off again. It's like, right. You were just washed off like 5 minutes ago. Why weren't you just washed off somewhere on your adventure then?
Like, can you imagine if like the wave actually killed Arlo the second time? This movie would have been fucked up. This is a dark ass movie. But it's like the rest of it is like Spot cutting him open like a tauntaun to sleep inside of him. But
Jesus Christ.
The mother and her remaining forgotten siblings die because they didn't bring in the harvest before winter.
Right, because they disappeared.
Yeah.
Okay, it just becomes like Grave of the Fireflies, but with fucking dinosaurs.
Kind of a more interesting movie.
True, yes, completely.
This is one of Pixar's missteps for sure. It's kind of a shame that it's not a sequel misstep. Like, this was an original property, and it's just kind of fell apart. I still gotta say, I kind of prefer this one to Brave, because Brave is even more of a letdown for me. I'm just like, oh man, I mean, it looks gorgeous. I love the character design, but you're like, this is just stupid. I mean, this, at least there is moments of genuine heart in it. I don't know. It's just a shitty movie. It's a whiny fucking punk ass kid who's not helping his goddamn mother. You know, your father died for you, you fuck. Get out there and you chuck that fucking cord.
I don't care if you're the smallest one. You have no excuses. Go get that corn, or you can go and die like your father did.
Okay, Pixar, now I need you to take these 2 voice tracks and have 2 Stegosauruses bitching at Arlo in the special edition version.
Insert Ray Fiennes on top of the house.
Oh, God.
Well, Ray Fiennes would probably be wasted also, let's be honest.
Before we go too far in this really dark direction, I guess it's time for final thoughts on The Good Dinosaur. So, James, your final thoughts.
This is just a big disappointment to me. It has a lot of promise, it has a great cast, and a good idea for a story, and it just squanders it. Don't get me wrong, I did like, well, the idea of a Sam Elliott dino western, and that whole bit of him coming in and doing of course I was scared. I liked that didn't go into the typical bullshit toxic masculinity, real men don't get scared kind of shit. It's like, yeah, it's natural to get scared. But I mean, it feels like that's the only positive I can make. I watched this with my dog, and you know what? He was absolutely captivated. So at least one of us fucking was.
It works for dogs and children.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a couple moments in here that kind of pulled at my heartstrings a little bit. I don't know if it's because I'm a father. I don't know if it's because I'm a fucking sap. I don't know if it's because I was like lit up on a highball and a bunch of Milwaukee's Best. Could have been that. But it's just a stale movie. Like I'm saying, there's these moments, but I can't even tell you one of the moments. It's just ultimately kind of a really dull, forgettable outing by Pixar, and it's a real shame.
Yeah, because even at their worst, they make something memorable. Like, as the only person here who apparently saw Cars 2, there are things from that are seared into my brain that I can never forget. Like, Mater eating wasabi, and I'm just like, why do cars have wasabi? Fuck, this universe doesn't make any goddamn sense. I really agree. It's super disappointing, Pixar, and it's super bland, forgettable, which is almost worse than some of their worser movies for me on some level, just because it's like, I can't believe I could ever say a Pixar movie is really bland, necessarily. And it's like, oh, Adam kind of mentioned, like, hey, this is for kids, it's not aimed for us, necessarily, but it's like, these guys have had such an interesting track record that if it was at least, like, an ambitious, big failure, like I think Brave is going for so much more and has at least so much it's flying at the screen that it just, when it doesn't work, it's still like, well, I can see that you tried. This one doesn't feel like it has that much effort in it beyond, like I said, the background stuff looks amazing, and some of the moments that we talked about here work, but then there's stuff, like, we didn't even talk about this, the weird shaman Triceratops character.
Oh,
yeah!
And the gag is, remember that? Right, you have that on paper, like, oh, there's a weird shaman Triceratops? That sounds great, and then you watch and you're like, oh, he names all his birds and creatures on his horns different over-the-top names, and then one of them is named, like, Cheryl.
Yeah, that's a good joke.
That was great. The 10 out of 10. All that company. It ultimately ends up being so underwhelming that it deserves its spot as the lowest grossing Pixar movie, and one that sort of deserves to be forgotten.
I see what you did.
What? I don't even know what I did.
Deserves spot.
Oh.
That's the name of the boy. Oh.
The sad thing is I completely forgot about the name of that fucking character, even though you mentioned it like 10 minutes ago.
What movie are we even talking about at this point?
Well, that joke's soared.
Oh. That puts a big bow on our discussion of these two Pixar movies. Before we go and do our picking at the end of the episode for next week, we have some feedback we want to read, because every Monday on the Double Edge Double Bill Facebook and Twitter feed at DEDBpod, we share a call to action about, like, hey, what are your favorite, least favorite examples of this particular topic we're doing? And so we asked all of you about best and worst Pixar films, and Matt Kozlowski says, best Toy Story 3 and A Bug's Life, worst Cars 2. Brian Stitcher of The Horror Returns says Toy Story and Ratatouille are my favorites, and Cars is my least favorite. Rachel Hillis says absolute faves, Incredibles, the Toy Story films, especially 2, Ratatouille, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and Inside Out. As for least favorites, I don't really care for The Good Dinosaur. In fact, I barely remember it. Elwood_Tiberius on Twitter says, WALL-E is hands down my favorite. Weirdly, though, I wound up really getting sold on the Cars franchise after visiting Cars Land at Disneyland. Just really nailed the relaxed mid-century car nostalgia. Strongest cry, though? Inside Out. Bing bong. Still can't see a picture of that character without having to stuff a frog down my own throat. I'd also like to see The Incredibles continued further as a franchise. Love Brad Bird's aesthetic. I had the option of turning off The Good Dinosaur, and I did. I give it credit for having a psychedelic sequence where a feral child and a juvenile dinosaur trip balls after eating the wrong mushrooms, but it's not good. And then Jonathan Havner McHale says, in a very succinct list here, favorite Pixar movies by era: early Pixar from 95 to 2000, Toy Story 2. Classic Pixar, 2001-2006, Finding Nemo. Golden Age of Pixar, 2007 to 2010, Ratatouille. Darkest Timeline Pixar, 2011 to 2014, All three films between Toy Story 3 and Inside Out are my all-time least favorites. And then post-crisis Pixar, 2015 to the present, Coco. And then Lance Langford, also the horror turn, says Finding Nemo was my favorite, Cars 2 is horrible. And then Tori DePina says favorites, the Toy Story trilogy, both Monsters, Inc. movies, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, A Bug's Life, Wall-E, and Up. Least all three Cars films and The Good Dinosaur. I never finished Brave, so that too?
Well, Lance and Tori are both kind of on my fucking shit list forever. But, I can't really disagree with any of those. It's been so long since I've seen Ratatouille. I think I've only seen it once. So that's one I'd really, really like to revisit because I remember really enjoying it. And Elwood, come on, bro. You're throwing the Cars. Cars, man, come on. Come on. I understand you had a great time. That's great. You had your memory. Cars Land at whatever park you were, whether it was Disney World or Disneyland. And that's great. That's great. Leave it there. Don't bring that shit home. Nobody needs that.
What happens at Disneyland stays at Disneyland.
But no, I mean, the rest of them, you can't disagree with really any of them. Way to go, Jonathan, for the fucking thesis, by the way.
Well, at least the timeline. I think that's a very accurate timeline, though. Of especially Darkest Timeline is definitely around that era, like 2011 to 2014. That's around where it started getting rough. And then, they've been getting a lot better as of recent. And I mean, I totally agree with him, especially about Coco. I think is their latest masterpiece, probably.
Yeah, that might
easily
be my favorite, actually. That might be my favorite. I always, for some reason, Toy Story 2 I love so much, but man, do I fucking love Coco. Coco is just, talk about pulling at the heartstrings and everything else. Fucking hell. That's a fantastic film.
Even when it was in theaters, it started off by torturing you with a Frozen special.
We never got that in the UK, actually. They actually showed the Frozen special as its own little thing for if kids want to drag their parents to see it. So us Brits got to see Coco on its own. Yay.
Well, I mean, I remember because the whole thing was they showed it originally with that, and Americans, but then especially Mexico, fucking hated that. Because I was like, oh, it's Coco. It's this big movie that celebrates our heritage. And it's like, the fuck is this white snowman doing here? Get him the fuck out of here. For sure. But would you agree with some of these as well, James, about what are some of your other favorite Pixars?
Well, I have nothing but love for Wall-E. I think it's an adorable little love story, and Wall-E and Eve are one of my favourite pairings that Pixar has ever created. Finding Nemo, we were talking about the opening from Up being heartbreaking, and I honestly think Finding Nemo is just as crushing an opener, and it sets the mood for the rest of the film up to the perfect finale. Those are some of my favourites. Ratatouille, I remember I like it, but Linguini, ginger kid, really irritated me. Outside of that, Inside Out, Sadness is my Patronus, and Bing Bong makes my heart shatter into a million pieces. And Incredibles is, well, I'm superhero mad, and this love letter to the genre just is pretty much catnip for me. Oh, and Edna Mode is fucking terrific. No caps!
Capes, no, yes, exactly. I guess I kind of talked about this at the end of last episode, and Adam kind of voiced this, and I agree with it. I still would say Toy Story 2 is the best of the Toy Stories. I think it's no disrespect to the original Toy Story, which is obviously great, and then even Toy Story 3, which I still really enjoy it. I recently got like the Blu-ray of the trilogy set kind of thing, and I still dig Toy Story 3. I just still think there's a few points where it feels a bit more maudlin than necessarily needs to be, and way more like they're kind of, with the other Pixar movies, it's like, oh, they're emotionally manipulating you, but it doesn't feel as obvious. There's some points in Toy Story 3 where it kind of feels like they're really leaning on, like, you fucking loves these things, don't you? Well, look at him fucking almost die. You piece of shit. Look at him. A bit. I think some of it feels a bit contrived, but not in a way that I feel like it's that big of a step down, necessarily. Nothing else. That's what makes me more excited about Toy Story 4, because the idea of Forky, and they're actually kind of talking about the sentience of these toys, is like, that's the one corner you never explored. So that's at least interesting. That's a new avenue to go down. But would you guys agree, especially James, would you agree with that about Toy Story 2?
Well, personally, I hold Toy Story is my favorite of all the Pixar's, the first one. It's probably due to nostalgia, but I have so much love for it. But that's not a knock on Toy Story 2. It's a masterful sequel to a film I consider masterful. And fuck it, I love Toy Story 3. It emotionally manipulates at times, but it... the fucking fireplace scene just has me streaming tears.
That is such a ballsy move on their part too. Like these toys accepted their fate that they're gonna burn to death. Like it's so insane to me. I can't fucking believe it.
Oh, I especially love. Have you seen the video online of like the guy who like showed his parents who hadn't seen it before Toy Story, and he edited out the actual rest of the movie?
No.
And so he made it. There's a video online that's really awesome where it's like it's so great where he just shows it to his parents and he showed them a version that just says like, oh, they're accepting fate, and then it fades out, and then a sad version of "You Got a Friend in Me" plays over the credits. It's so fucking funny.
Wow, that is wow.
His mom literally just says like, they ended it like that.
That's great.
But I mean, I'll also say, like, I think my bigger issue necessarily, I think the emotion manipulation thing might not have been that fair because any movie is really kind of trying to do that. I think it's just more, Toy Story 3 does build a lot on the stuff that Toy Story 2 especially did. I think it builds on a lot of those themes and kind of recycles them, not necessarily in an overly, like, we're completely duplicating it way, but I think it just does a lot of things Toy Story 2 already, I think, accomplished beautifully. Like, I don't think we would get the stuff we get in Up or any of these other like big emotional Pixar moments without the whole Jessie backstory sequence in Toy Story 2. I think that is so crucial to like what turned Pixar from like, oh wow, they made computer long form animated movies to they will fucking tear your soul in half.
Oh, that Jessie sequence is that's heartbreaking. I mean, yeah, Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3 do share a lot of similar themes, but I always thought that Toy Story 2 brings up like the ideas of Andy's not going to want to play with you anymore, and the toys are, by the end of it, they're like, yeah, we'll be ready for when that time comes. And then the theory that they'll be ready is put into motion in Toy Story 3, and it turns out that no jack shit about they're not fucking prepared.
Anybody else think Andy's kind of a fucking nerd?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing is they kind of villainize Sid in the first Toy Story, but it's like that's how a lot of kids do kind of play with their toys anyway. They kind of like tear them the fuck apart.
Andy's the fucking serial killer at this point. He's like 19 going to college. It's Sheriff Woody. Hello, and you're like, oh.
Do we need Toy Story 3.5 where it's like a college campus murder serial killer movie?
Right,
with
him
Andy
dressed as Woody. Yeah, I have become Woody.
There's a snake in my boot. It's a knife.
Now there's a snake in your mouth.
I don't know why, but now I'm imagining Happy Death Day, but with Woody from Toy Story. So thanks for that. I got nightmares now.
Pixar hasn't made their horror movie yet. Come on, guys, it's bound to work.
Wouldn't that be crazy if they do it like right out the gate? It's like Cannibal Holocaust level of insanity. You're like, holy fuck!
With songs by Randy Newman.
You got a spike up your butt.
But I'll close up at least with the Toy Story thing. We didn't even mention this with our last movie, but it's weird they had a main character in The Good Dinosaur who's a neurotic, kind of awkward dinosaur, because they already kind of perfected that with Rex, who's like my favorite side character in those movies.
Yeah, I think he's mine too. I don't know. I do love Ham, but yeah, Rex might be my favorite too out of all the Toy Story side characters. He's so funny.
That's another weird thing where like those movies. Just like the fact that, especially with the first one, I watched it so much as a small child, that even still when I see and hear Tom Hanks' voice, I'm just like, oh man, that old dude looks like Woody. And then when I hear Wallace Shawn, I'm like, oh god, that little guy sounds like Rex. And then I hear Tim Allen, I'm like, oh, that convicted cokehead sounds like Buzz Lightyear.
Michigan's own. Oh yeah.
It's so weird. One of childhood cinema's greatest pairings comes from Mr. Everybody Loves Him, Tom Hanks, and fucking Tim Allen.
Yeah, porn stash coke smuggler.
Yep. Part of me was just like, when they did like that animated Buzz Lightyear series and they had Patrick Warburton do the voice of Buzz Lightyear, I'm like, why didn't you just redub all these movies with Patrick Warburton?
Tim Allen does a fantastic job.
No, that's true. That's true. It's like Toy Story movies and Galaxy Quest are the ones where it's like, okay,
Love Galaxy
you
Quest.
earned your existence for now.
Don't do any more harmful narcotics.
No, yeah, or be a really stupid conservative piece of shit. Anyway, we have some other feedback to read. Lance Langford says in reference to Samuel Jackson, the topic of our last episode, says, the 90s were a true sweet spot for Samuel Jackson performances in Jurassic Park, True Romance, and of course Pulp Fiction. In between his many appearances as Nick Fury, he has gone into a kind of I'll do anything that pays mode with examples like Big Game, the RoboCop reboot, and Cell. And then Tori responded to our lovely conversation about him at the end of that last episode, where he talks about, no fucking way, you guys reviewed The Caveman's Valentine? LMFAO. My dirty floor predicted that Jumper would be the pick, and he had literally a shot of the Jumper DVD on his floor. And then he also had a shot where I talked about, like, oh, hey, yeah, we kind of roasted you. And he apparently had a conversation with Shaquille where he's like, yeah, you guys fucking roasted me hard, but I deserved it.
Yeah, guess what? It's round 2, you motherfucker. Clean your fucking house, first of all. And you know what? Yeah, we talked about Caveman's Valentine. You own Jumper. What the fuck? You know what, dude? Fuck you, Tori. God damn it. Oh.
You've become Lewis Black from Inside Out. You've become pure anger.
The one thing I've always hated. But no, no, that's a good point, Tori. Yeah, we did. Oh, and Lance, I'm not even going to touch Lance, although I absolutely agree with everything he said. I forgot about that fucking Big Game movie, 100%. Isn't that the one with the fucking kid?
Right, yeah, where it's like he and Samuel Jackson crash land, and the whole thing was that it was directed by this guy who made Rare Exports. And you're like, oh man, he's doing another movie. And apparently it was bad. I didn't see it because I heard it was just not good.
Well, no, look at it. It looks fucking stupid. What is just a cliche piece? Now I'm mad about that too. Good lord. You gotta see somebody.
But what about President Samuel L. Jackson?
Well, I actually don't really have a problem with that, frankly. And I don't know that I want my president saying motherfucker a lot, but I mean, I guess it really.
We've done worse. Right. I'm sorry, James. This discussion about terrible political figures in the country does not affect you at all, right? Not at all.
I'm saying nothing with the shit show going on down here.
You're welcome for Larry the Cable Guy again, by the way.
Oh, it's like Christmas rolled into every fucking day of the year.
Well, we want to thank also all of you who provide that feedback. We also want to thank people like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Emily Scarda for the art that she provided for our show. She accepts commissions at 502rs.com/eescarda. And of course, we want to thank Mr. James Rodrigues here. James, what do you have to plug?
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm on Twitter. My handle is RoddersJ04. That's spelled RODDERS. I also do reviews at Rodders Reviews, Rodders spelled the same way, roddersreviews.blogspot.com. If you look on there, you can see I recently posted a review of X-Men Dark Phoenix, which was, I would imagine.
Yeah. But no, dude, thank you for coming on. It was absolutely an honor to have you on, and I could listen to you talk all day.
Well, thank you very much. It was lovely to be here, and I'm honored you had me on.
Yeah, just don't get too excited.
But, of course, we are available as well on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod. As we mentioned, that's where we post our feelers about, hey, why don't you tell us your favorite and least favorite things. And also, right now, if you're listening to this as it comes out, the day it's coming out, you can still vote on the Twitter and Facebook page for one of our movies for a future episode. Yes, not the next episode, but the episode after is our 2019 So Far show. And Adam's 2 picks, instead of being chosen by me randomly, are chosen now by you, the people, with this, where you can either vote on Replicas, the Keanu Reeves movie that he doesn't want you to talk about from this year, unlike all the other ones. Because Keanu's having a fucking moment right now. That's pretty impressive. But in January, he came out with the stupid sci-fi movie nobody saw. But you can either vote for that or Glass, the M. Night Shyamalan follow-up to Split and Unbreakable.
Replicas is only leading because it's Keanu Reeves. It's gotta be.
I think so, because I don't think no one knows what that movie is except, Keanu's on the cover.
Absolutely not. That's gotta be the only reason. Or it's dickheads who listen to the show and like, fuck these guys. Let's really get after them. That's the only thing it can be. Because, god damn it, I should have picked something else.
Serenity was right there, Adam.
I know, I should have picked that. I haven't seen it, but I'm dying to out of sheer morbid curiosity.
I didn't watch it because I'm like, I'm sure Adam's going to do that for the show. That's what we're going to do. But then I ended up watching it anyway, and we'll save it for that episode, but there's a lot in that one, for sure. Yeah. James, what's your least favorite movie of the year so far?
Hellboy.
Oh, see? I completely agree with you. That is also my least favorite movie of the year so far.
Ah, you too suffered it, I see.
Yeah, it was garbage.
But you can still vote on that until June 19th, so the day after this episode comes out, June 19th, 2019. But you can also send us feedback at doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com. That's our email address. You can also send thoughts my way or follow me at NotTheWho'sTommy on Twitter. And I also write reviews at marianithomas.wordpress.com. And you can also find Adam tolling away at doing the Good Dinosaur 2, because no one else is going to do it.
Chucking fucking corn.
Well, isn't that the subtitle, Good Dinosaur 2 Corn Chucker?
Oh, God. Now that I would watch.
For more quality content like all of this, you can subscribe to us on any of the different podcast platforms like the Spotify, the Stitcher, the YouTube, or the iTunes. It's still around. Tim Cook's waiting to just pull the plug on it.
Right.
Yeah, but it's there right now. And you can rate review us on all those different platforms or just share the show to give us more visibility.
Yeah, seriously. I post dank-ass memes all the time. And nobody can do anything for me. I give you seconds of joy. You can't give me 1 second of a share. It's over, man.
Well, it's not quite over yet, Adam, because now we have to do our picking for next week's episode. And in honor of... Earlier this, at the end of May, was the anniversary of the premiere of Alien, the 40th anniversary. But I believe it was around in June when it started rolling out to bigger areas, when it had sort of its wide American release. Or at least that's what IMDb says, and it's more just an excuse for us to talk about the Alien franchise, which we kind of dabbled in, because we did the Predator episode, and we talked about an Alien vs. Predator movie on there. But we're going to talk about two movies distinctly from the Alien franchise specifically. And for all the faults, it's one of the more fascinating big studio franchises, just in terms of how often they get very diverse voices to helm those movies and the really weird results that come out of it.
It's all over the place, man.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
And you, Adam, have the two good movies for that, and I have the two bad movies, and we've each assigned numbers between 1 and 10 to both our movies, and usually we would each pick a number between 1 and 10 ourselves to see what good or bad movie we get, but when we have a guest like James, they get the chance to pick. So James, for Adam's two good movies, number between 1 and 10.
Let's go with number 2.
At number 2, I have Aliens, the sequel. I'm pretty much guessing you both know what my other pick was.
Alien vs. Predator Requiem, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. No,
Yes.
It was Alien. I had Alien and Aliens. I do like some of the other ones in the franchise, but not enough to really say put them as good.
Right, of course. And now for my two bad choices, James, number between 1 and 10.
God, this is going to be a minefield. Let's go with number 7.
Okay, right on the dot at number 7, I had the Alien film from 1997, Alien Resurrection.
Well, then, remember when I said I kind of like some of the other ones? That would be one of them.
Well, that's another one that just has such a weird, different
It's so
sort of thing.
fucking bizarre.
It's so just ludicrous with that. And speaking of ludicrous, at number 3, I had Alien Covenant, the most recent entry, which I also have a lot of issues with, but at the same time, Fassbender in that movie, though, is such a fucking great performance. He's so good in that movie.
I was literally going to go, remember what I said? I kind of like a couple of them.
No, Alien Covenant, I will say, is at least the more interesting of the two. more recent terms, yeah. James, like, what is your sort of, like, favorite and least favorite of the Alien franchise?
I haven't seen Resurrection. I haven't seen Requiem. For me, the haunted house in space classic of the original is my favorite and one of my favorite horror films. But of the others I've seen, Alien vs. Predator would probably be bottom. I mean, fucking Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Predator episode. Yep. Pretty bad. But thank you, James, for picking these choices. And now we have to go ahead and put, helium balloons on top of the podcast and soar out of here, guys, right?
Right. Long live the giant condor.
Yay! I'm on helium.
Good night, everybody.